Welcome to Real Talk, where I give real answers to real questions from real worship leaders. If you are a real worship leader with a real question and you want a real answer, head right here to submit your question for a future episode. Got some good questions this week? Let's talk about it. New member on the worship team with a beautiful voice, but lacking in the character department. Feels and acts like she is better than everyone else and is quick to let us know she is a professional. How do we deal with this attitude? Kick her off the team! No, I'm just kidding. But maybe. I don't. Maybe that's a solution. First of all, we want to kind of protect ourselves from these situations, which is why it's good to have a good application and interview process before people join our team. Listen, even if you're in a small church, that's still important to have. It's not just for big churches. I don't serve in a huge church. I serve in a church of 100 people, and I have an interview/application process that people fill out before they join the worship team. Because what that does is that protects us from getting people like this on our worship team. Because being on the worship team isn't just it's open to everybody in the church and everybody can do it. I mean, it's not guarded where we're keeping people off the worship team, but serving in ministry, especially in a public ministry, on the platform on Sunday, comes with a higher responsibility. And we want to make sure that our leaders are upholding the values that we all have as members of the church, especially for leaders in the church, which if you are on the worship team, you might not be on the same level as a pastor in your church. Not that there's these, hierarchical levels in a church necessarily, but we still have expectations that we're living up to. You might not have the title of pastor is what I'm trying to say, but we still have these expectations that we are held to as leaders in our church, or leaders will be judged more harshly, right? We all know that Bible verse. And if you are on the worship team, you are now a leader in some capacity in the church, and therefore it is okay to judge those people more harshly than you would judge just a normal person who comes to your church who just shows up and is in the congregation on Sunday. Once again, not that we're on different levels than them, but we have different expectations for people who are going to serve in leadership in the church. So I say all that because you should have a vetting process. You should have an application form that people fill out where you ask some tough questions, get them to commit to the values of your team. One of those values should probably be that they're going to work well with other team members, just like normal moral expectations that we have, that they're going to be humble, that they're going to be teachable. These are important expectations to have for worship team members, and that will protect you in the future because, number one, usually those people who act like that, like you're talking about on the team, they will see that and be like, these people actually take their worship team seriously, and I can't commit to those things, so I'm not even going to try to fill out the application form. And then boom, that person's not on your team in the first place, and then you don't have to deal with the problem. But second of all, if they do choose to join your team, then you can point back to that code of conduct that you've already laid out for them and say, listen, this is what we agreed to when you joined the team, and I just feel like we're having some problems there. That way, the clarity is set up front. This is what we expect from worship team members, that they would be teachable, that they would be willing to receive feedback from the leaders of the team, etc., etc. So when I give you feedback, I need you to work on the things that I tell you to work on. So if you don't have that in your church, check out the Worship Team Toolkit link down below. I've got an application form that I use for my worship ministry and the code of conduct that I use for my worship ministry. You can copy and paste that into your worship ministry, and then you'll have it to refer to. Now, what do you do in the meantime if you haven't have that set up? Then I would definitely be having a conversation with this person. Once again, clarity fixes every problem in a worship ministry. Now, I guess the one thing that you didn't talk about in your question was whether you are the worship team leader or not. I feel like I always have to preface this because I always get questions from worship team members who are like, how do I deal with this problem on my team, when it's actually a problem for the worship team leader to deal with, and it's not your problem, and you don't have the authority on your team to deal with it, so you shouldn't be trying to deal with it because it's not going to help anything. So if you are not the worship team leader, do not do the things that I'm about to tell you, because these are things that worship team leaders do, and this problem that you refer to is a worship team leader problem that they need to deal with. And so if you're the worship team leader, I would sit down and talk to this person and just say, hey, here are some of my concerns. It seems like during rehearsal, it just feels like when I give you input, it's not received. It's not like you don't take it to heart. And I want our team to sound as good as possible, and it might not even be necessarily that you're doing anything wrong. It's just now that we're on a team that we need to learn how to work together. And so the suggestions that I make might not even be against you as a singer. It's just how we're all going to work together. Or sometimes it might be a comment that might help you lead a little bit better. So I just feel like you aren't receiving the advice that I'm giving. And you just start the conversation that way. And maybe they are just oblivious and they will be like, I did not even realize that I was coming off that way. I'm sorry that I was doing that. Or maybe they'll push back and you just say, listen, as worship team members, like, we have made the commitment that we are going to serve each other, that we are going to be kind to each other, that no one is above anybody else, that we are going to serve each other humbly, that we are going to take instruction from the team leader. And so I would like to see that happen a little bit more on the worship team when it comes to when I give you advice. Clarity solves every problem in our worship ministry. Just talk to the person. And I'm not saying that conversation is easy. And don't have it at rehearsal around everybody. Talk to this person afterwards. Sit down with them. Just say, hey, I've got something I want to talk to you about after a rehearsal. And literally, it will feel bad for the 5-10 minutes that you have the conversation. And then it will be a weight off of your shoulders because you've addressed the problem and you can move on from there. I'm helping pioneer a new church. The pastor of our church plays lead guitar for our worship team. Stop right there. Pastor, stop playing on your worship team. It only causes problems for your church. I don't know if that's true every time, but I feel like every question that I get is like, my pastor's on the worship team. They have more authority in the church that I have. I haven't finished reading this question yet, but I already know where it's headed. My pastor has more authority than I have, but they told me I'm in charge of the worship team, but they're on the worship team, and they don't want to submit themselves under my authority on the worship team, and now I don't feel like I'm the leader of the worship team. Let's see if the tale has been foretold. The pastor of our church plays lead guitar for our worship team. He previously led worship before asking me to be the worship director. Every time during worship, he usually takes over and leads or opens service, keeps the song going. He doesn't follow my lead. I have to follow his. When we do a community service, he usually plans out all the details, and I find out along with the team just a week before. And then during the event, he leads. I'm wondering if I am even the leader. I don't know what I would say if I did have a conversation with him, but I'm wondering if I should. The prophecy, long foretold, has been fulfilled in this question. I see it every time. I know it's not really funny because it is a problem, but it's just such a common problem in churches. Is like the pastor's on the worship team and the pastor has always done everything, and it probably flowed out of, like you said, he was the worship director before, and now you stepped in and he wants you to be the worship director. It probably started out from a necessity of there was nobody else in the church to lead worship. But this is a message for all pastors out there, which I don't know if you're watching this video or not. But please, if you hand the reins over to somebody to serve as the worship team director and you once served at it, or if you play an instrument and you serve on the team, please give them the responsibility of leading the team. It's not helpful for you to do everything in the church. It will only hinder your ministry, and you are actually not fulfilling your role as a pastor, because your role as a pastor is to equip the saints for the works of ministry, and that means that you don't do everything yourself. So if that's you, stop. Go and repent and apologize to your worship leader who you told could be the worship team leader, but you have usurped their role on the worship team. Now, what should you do in this situation, person who asked this question? Go talk to your pastor and tell them, you asked me to be in charge of the worship team, and I feel like you've just gone on and planned everything. These are things that I can do, that I can take off your plate. I know that you are super busy because you're busy pastoring the church and you're preaching on Sundays and X, Y, and Z. This is something that I can take off your plate for you. And you have asked me to be the director of worship. So I feel like ever since you've asked me that, you've still been doing everything. And you plan all the stuff and you lead every song, and it feels like I'm always following you whenever you lead worship. And I'm fine to do that if that's how you want to run things, but then I'm not the worship team leader. And I don't have to be the worship team leader, but I'm able to do it. So if you want me to do that, I would love to do that. But it's not happening right now. So let me know what you want me to do. I would love to lead the team, but that is going to require you to relinquish some control of the worship ministry. So if you're okay with that, I'd love to be able to do that for you and take that off your plate. But, you know, we've tried it, and you're not relinquishing the control of it. That is the conversation in some form that you need to have with your pastor. And I know that that's not an easy conversation, but honestly, if you feel like you can't have that conversation with your pastor, then that's probably a red flag for me, because I've been in churches before where I felt like I couldn't have that conversation with my pastor. And that's not a good feeling, because you should be able to, especially if you are like the head of a ministry in your church, even if you're not, you should be able to talk to your pastor and say, hey, these are some of the things that I'm struggling with in my ministry right now, in the ministry that I'm serving in. Like, is there anything that we can do about this? And if you come at it with a heart of humility, letting your pastor know that you're seeking to serve him, to serve the church, to expand his capacity to lead the church as the pastor, because he's going to be freed up and have more time, I don't see how that could be a bad conversation unless your pastor is not a healthy pastor and is a control freak and wants to have his hands in everything. So, yes, have the conversation. Just bring it up. Just like I said, I want to serve you. I want to free you up to be able to serve in other areas, and I don't feel like I'm in charge of the worship ministry right now. So what can we do about that? Now, like I mentioned before, if you need a worship team application form and a code of conduct for your worship ministry, maybe to keep pastors like this off your team. I'm just kidding. But if you need those things, check out the worship team toolkit down in the description below. In that, I will give you everything that I use in my worship ministry. The application form, it's a Google form that you can just copy and paste into your own Google form, have people fill it out, and you'll get an email when they fill it out. And I also give you the code of conduct that I use that you can copy and paste and use that right into your own worship ministry as well. So check that out down in the description below. Other than that, thanks so much for joining me. Till I see you in the next video, keep leading worship well.